I'm excited today to be here with Jessica Baghian, who is Assistant Commissioner at the Louisiana Department of Education and has been on the front lines of managing a lot of our challenges around COVID-19 from a state level. And today we're going to be talking to Jessica about a real life scenario. All of us who are trying to manage in many ways high stress leadership roles in our organizations and also facilitate learning at home with our children. So Jessica, thanks for being with us today. And I'm going to jump right in with a question that I think we can all relate to. How's it going? This has been a unique time period in our world, really, and we are now probably not at the beginning or the end of it. We're somewhere in the middle, and would love to hear from your perspective, just how's it going trying to manage all of this from a very high-level state role?
Well, Candice, thank you for having me and for giving conversation to something that is front of mind, I think, for so many of us. These are unprecedented. That feels like the word of the year times. And I feel right now more grateful than I ever have for just the incredible team we have at the SEA here in Louisiana. We have an incredible executive staff, and our team overall is just so committed to kids and supporting our districts and charters and child cares. And I've never seen that, frankly, more than I have right now. That said, I'm coming to you live from my porch, where you'll inevitably hear my children probably at some point in this conversation. And that has certainly been a learning curve for me. And I know for all of my colleagues in our school systems and at the agency overall. I think, my word right now for myself and my team and my marriage and my children is grace. Just trying to give everybody a lot of grace and trying to just really over communicate. How is it going? What's working? What's not? Both with my kids and how the day is rolling, with my husband and how we're facilitating things together, but also with my team. This looks different today than it did 7 days ago and certainly 20 days ago. And so just trying to be really intentional about keeping dialogue open, keeping personal connection, having more grace and forgiveness than is the typical day-to-day, and adjusting as we go.
Excellent. I love that you said the word grace. I think that's on everybody's minds as we think about all of the relationships that we have and trying to manage all of those at a time when we are experiencing a challenge like no other. Let me just jump into sort of some tips and strategies that you may have that feel pragmatic for those of us who are in a leadership role or an educator role, and we're now also trying to do the educator role at home with our own children. So describe some tips, strategies, ways that you're facilitating that for yourself and maybe the age of your children so we can relate to what that looks like.
Well, let me just first say that I do not profess to have any expertise in this area. I, like so many, am figuring this out as we go. I taught middle school math, but right now I'm facilitating the learning, staying alive and healthy of a 4.5-year-old and a 2-year-old, 2 boys, Charlie and Cyrus, and it has been crazy but really fun. So a couple of things we're doing, if these are helpful to others, and frankly I've stolen most of these from fellow moms on Twitter and Facebook. We've tried to just keep as consistent of routines as we can. So, day one of quarantine, I think I was like a lot of former educator moms. I have my schedule, we have the time slots, and I realized about 36 hours into that the schedule was probably a good idea. The time slots were a joke. So we are at this point just trying to follow the same flow of the day, so what's first, second, third, and way less committed other than nap time, which my 2-year-old has to have, to, how long exactly are we doing each activity, and trying to make that work. Another thing that I've done that felt a little bit silly at first, but has really frankly helped me as much as it has my son. He wears a uniform to school for pre-K 4. And so on school days, he is wearing his uniform at home, which I'm sure in 10 years when he looks back on this, he's going to roll his eyes at me. But I just think there's something helpful about this is a sort of school day and this is the weekend where, things frankly are as free-flowing as they are on school days. I also bought one of those calendars that we did in pre-K and kindergarten in school. I have such fond memories of, the calendar circle time every day. And so we're doing that to practice our days of the weeks and our months of the year, but also just to keep ourselves centered on where we are in time, which regularly can be a little bit hard to keep track of. We're getting outside as much as we can. It's pretty nice weather right now in Louisiana, and so that's certainly been a blessing. Doing as much learning as we can outside. We do a lot of little scavenger hunts where I write down, let's go find these 4 things, and then we go for a walk. And we're frankly watching a lot of screen time. You know, before this, I was a mom that was pretty rigid on that, and I am giving myself a lot of grace on that. We're trying to do as much PBS and Magic School Bus and those sorts of things as we can, but the reality is we just have to have more of it than we normally would. And then I'd finally say we're trying to end the day like we normally would. So one, I'm getting to have dinner with my kids every night, which is awesome. But when we have that dinner, we have a practice of saying 3 things we're grateful for or that were great about our day. And we are continuing that practice now. And then, of course, we read a couple of books before bed, and our bedtime routine has stayed exactly the same. So I think those little doses of consistency, wherever we get them, have been very helpful for all of us in keeping track of where we are.
Yeah, I appreciated the comment about the schedule. And I do think with older children, my children are older, it's easier to have those time slots and keep to them because they're trying to fit in work. But with younger children, it's very important just to have sort of the consistency of what's first, second, and third. And so what a great tip to think through with different age children as well. So in this time, we've all had a moment where we may not have been at our best. Those challenging moments that come when you're trying to manage the work and the learning all at the same time from, you know, a more confined area than typical. So can you share a real life, a real experience, anecdote that you have had as a person trying to do this work? I think we can all relate to it, and so it's great to see that there are other people who are having similar experiences that we are.
Yeah. One other thing we've done, and I stole this from Twitter too, with my colleagues when we're on, you know, Zoom number 7 of the day, because all we do is spend all day on Zoom, like so many right now. One of the things we've taken to doing is we talk about what's happening at home, but we call our children our coworkers just for humor's sake. So I'll do that in this example in case it's helpful. So the other day, my husband was off of work. He works in a hospital here as an internist. He was off of work, but he was sick actually, which meant I was anticipating a day where I could have my 10 hours of Zoom calls uninterrupted, but instead had 10 hours of Zoom calls and a 4-year-old and 2-year-old ready to do all sorts of fun things that I had not planned on. And so my coworkers that day had way too much sugar. They had way too much screen time. And by the time we got to the end of the day, I had one of my coworkers literally just hanging on me, asking for some other piece of sugar. I don't remember what it was, while I'm on the phone with a board member discussing very important matters about education for the state. And it just felt like this collision of worlds. You know, the most important thing to my 2-year-old in that moment was, I need this cookie, or who knows what it was. I don't even remember. I need this cookie in this moment. Give it to me right now. I'm so hyped up on sugar. Meanwhile, I'm trying to solve for the learning of 700,000 children across the state in real time. So I was certainly not at my best as a parent that day. But, you know, again, my word is grace, and I'm giving it to myself and to my children, my coworkers, if you will, and my formal coworkers as well. I will just say one thing that coming out of that day that I didn't mention before that I've been trying to be more intentional about for myself is focusing on what's good in those moments and what I can do in my own structures to step away from it. So I've tried at the end of the day to, at least for an hour, like my computer's going away and my phone is going away, to at least have a sort of close of the day moment where I am trying to, as much as I can, transition at least temporarily from work to my kids, to be all in for them for a minute. I'm trying to create dedicated workspace for myself. The first version of that I had was not working, so I have a new little table coming in to set up a new corner. And then I'm trying to center on the joy of the whole thing. You know, right now I'm saving probably an hour and a half every day between drop off and pickup. That is normally part of my schedule. And so even as calendars get more crazy and more packed for a whole host of reasons, that is an hour and a half of time that is newly realized for me. And I'm trying to maximize that So that's where we are.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. And, and I think too, the realization that you do have a bit of time that you wouldn't normally have without that commute is a realization of how much that there's positive about some of this as well. And so that really transitions to my last question. As you reflect on what you have experienced in this balancing act that you are moving through, there are certainly blessings, I'm sure, in the day and positive things that happened that you reflect on and you say, maybe I would not have realized that or noticed that if it had not been a sort of COVID-19 world that we're living in. Can you share one of those, something that's been really positive, maybe even about your relationship with your family, your kids, neighbors, and those that you reach out to on a regular basis at work?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look for them, there's so many of them. And that's part of why I think that gratitude practice at dinner always, but certainly right now, has been a really important one for our family. A couple that come to mind. The other day I was leading a Zoom for literally 1,000 early childhood educators across the state, the directors of all of our centers. And as I'm leading that call, I had to apologize because outside of the window, you could hear my 4-year-old and my 2-year-old just like squealing and laughing and having so much fun. And it felt like a really centering reminder about why we're all pushing as hard as we can to get learning to kids and to get our child cares back up and running post-COVID. The other thing, on a lighter note, I have learned that I am pretty good at riding a bike. So we recently bought one of those little buggies that, I don't know what they're actually called. We call them buggies in Louisiana, that you can ride behind for my kids. And I can both ride a bike for fussy children to ride in the buggy and run a conference call at the same time. So that was
impressive, Jessica. Very impressive.
I felt proud of that multitasking and being able to meet the needs of both coworkers and coworkers in the back at the same time.
I love that. I haven't quite done that. I have been reluctant to actually go on the walk or the run and try to run the conference call at the same time. But, since you're showing it can be done.
You recommend it. I think it's good for everybody to be out in the sunshine and moving your body. So where the call's conducive, I could not recommend it more.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to end with just a question that I hope you'll reflect on with me. We're trying to think through sort of self-care for our organization and for our coworkers as we continue to move through this moment. And so we started a fun self-care bingo game this past week where we put items that we hope folks will take advantage of as they are going throughout their week and try to get, 5 in a row and do something for themselves. What types of things are you doing at a department level, a state department level, that you feel like has encouraged folks to create balance and to think about themselves in such a large organization?
Yeah, I think balance is tricky. I mean, I don't mean to be a pessimist when I say this, but I sort of don't buy into balance generally in life. I just, particularly working with a team and myself being all in the way that I am on the thing I'm focused on. For me, it's constantly a balance of, in this day, in this week, in this month, am I spending my energy, my capacities where they're most valuable? Do my kids need me the most right now? My husband, my work, the kids of the state, and trying to toggle between those as needed. I will say the thing I've tried to be the most intentional about with my team is, one, I'm regularly updating them on what's happening. I just think right now, as you see with daily briefings from governors across the country, regular flow of communication so that people feel in the know, I think is as reassuring as almost anything you can do. And to show that here's what we have command of, here's what we don't have figured out. We are being very transparent and vulnerable about that on purpose. And here's where we're going to go next so that there's a regular flow there. But the other thing I've asked is, every manager on my team is having one-on-one conversations with every member of their team every week. So we have lots of Zooms and group meetings, but I think the one-on-one, no, really, are you okay? How are things going? Matters. I'm doing that with my direct reports, and they're doing that with theirs as well. For a team of 300 people, that takes intentionality, but I think is necessary. And then the final thing is, I've tried to model for my managers and ask them to do the same with their teams, really acknowledging the necessary flexibilities right now. So we are a team that typically as an agency runs from a, 7:30 to 4:30, 7:30 to 5:30 sort of schedule for most of our staff, not our executive team, but most of our staff. And we just have to be more flexible right now. So it may be that one of my colleagues that has a 3-year-old needs to use nap time just to rest and take a minute, or they want to clear emails, or that's the perfect time for them to be doing meetings that just require tons of mental capacity. The answer is different for everyone, and I think it's why it's so important for us as leaders to acknowledge that things need to look a little bit different right now and have open dialogue with each team member to make sure, as much as we can, we're accommodating what's going to help them be most successful in their work.
Excellent. I appreciate your time today. I know in a busy leader's life, it can be hard to step away and actually think with others about the work that we're all trying to do to get through this moment, but to do it with success, not just get through it, but really try to use it for the good of the people that we're serving and certainly the people in our own personal lives. So I appreciate you sharing some personal examples and helping us think through this as certainly a group of leaders across the country. So thank you. And I am certainly thinking about you and the work in Louisiana and wish the best on all of your students and educators and leaders as we continue to walk through the time that we're in. Thank you
for having me.